Hello everyone, my name is Jerry Swope and I'm a professor in the Department of Digital Media and Communications. And today I'm here speaking with Ashley DeLeon, a senior in our major. Ashley, could you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Hi, my name's Ashley DeLeon. I'm a senior media studies, journalism, digital arts major from the Bronx, New York.
Excellent. And as you heard, Ashley said she was a media studies, journalism, and digital arts major. Our department recently changed our name. We used to be media studies, journalism, and digital arts, and now our department's called Digital Media and Communications. Our curriculum hasn't changed. We just feel like the name better reflects what we do. And using the term communications, it's a broader term that encompasses so many of the various things that we do in our department. So I might say digital media and communications. I might say DMC. Ashley might say media studies, journalism, digital arts, or MJD. So we're still getting used to that new name. And for the most of the 4 years Ashley's been here, it's been MJD.
Yeah.
So that leads into my next question. Why this major? Why DMC or MJD?
So storytelling's always been a big thing for me, and what I love about the major is that there's a lot of breadth. So there's no pressure to say, okay, I am just a journalism student, I am only doing news reporting every single day, or I'm only doing graphic design, because you get to dip your toes into everything, and even concentrate into specific areas if you really want to. There's a lot of flexibility to try different things, and I learned that the value of storytelling isn't just confined to one area. So it's not like news reporting is like the #1 storytelling and everything else falls under. Like everything has a lot of value, and I didn't really know that until I joined the major.
Great. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I appreciate about our major is that we have a converged curriculum where we want students to be comfortable working in a variety of forms of media, right? We want students to learn to be good writers. We want students to learn to be comfortable making pictures. We want students to be comfortable working in digital video, learning basic design principles, things like that. So I think students get a lot of different areas and a lot of different skills. Within that, have you found that you're drawn to a particular area of study within our major?
I'd say definitely more recently documentary film. I wasn't introduced to film until last year, and even then I didn't want to introduce myself to film. Professor Hyde was like, "You're taking my digital film class, right?" And I was like, maybe not. And he was like, "You're taking my digital film class." So I took his digital film class. And it was definitely a big culture shock for me. One, film, it's very male dominated. Two, I never really touched a camera like that. I did robotics throughout high school, but still did not want anything to do with cameras. But after lots and lots of weeks of practice and lots of good mentorship from him, I actually started to like what I was doing. So I decided I'm just going to stick with it, see where it can take me. So as I've gained more experience also in public health, doing things with the Community Health Action Network, which was previously the COVID Action Network. I really loved that, but I liked film, so I was like, how can I converge those two along with my experience in news reporting through The Defender and through writing for news publications in the area. So then that led me to documentary storytelling with a focus on public health and marginalized communities.
Great. And are you working on any particular projects right now focusing in on those kinds of stories?
So recently I completed a documentary short about how diabetes is affecting communities in New York City, specifically in Upper Manhattan and the South Bronx. Because of food insecurities and food deserts, it's difficult for people to control their blood sugars because they don't have access to the foods that would actually do that. And so those areas are seeing very high rates of amputations. And my dad actually performs those amputations, and I was able to interview him. And the alarming thing is that when he first started his practice, the people he was amputating were, in their 60s, 70s. They were older patients, but now he's amputating people in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s. So I thought it was a very timely issue, one that has not been covered in mainstream media, which was a little weird for me growing up because I just felt like the issue was entirely unseen. So yeah, I had a lot of great mentorship from Professor Hyde. I asked him if I could do it for the final for adventure and outdoor adventure. I forgot the name of the class.
Adventure and environmental filmmaking, is that it?
That, yes. So, and he was like, absolutely. And we did the film treatment. We planned out all the shots. This was the largest film I've made, and it came out really well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before you got into doing film, I know you cut your teeth working on the Defender, the school newspaper, and you were involved in a lot of print publications, and you were the executive editor. Can you talk a little bit about how that experience shaped you as a storyteller and helped you develop other skills, maybe related or not related to storytelling?
So journalism forced me to be social. It's not that I wasn't a social creature. I just didn't prefer to socialize with people. But when you get a story and it's like, hey, you got to talk to person A, B, and C, and you don't know these people, it really throws you out of your comfort zone. And that started my freshman year when I worked for the marketing department. I actually learned a lot about the people who work here, and even peers, just by being assigned a story and having to go somewhere and talk to people. And then, I really liked it. I actually liked being around people and talking to them and learning about them, so got involved with the Defender. And I stuck with it for about 3 years. I started as a contributing writer my freshman year and finished my term last spring, as I like to call my retirement.
As an executive editor after being executive editor for a few semesters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So let's just go back a little bit. We've talked about our major, but why St. Mike's? What drew you to St. Michael's College?
So I went to a really small high school. It was actually an all-women's high school. Wasn't a fan of the all-women's part, but it was a great school. I loved how it was a really tight community because I got to learn about people, learn their names. Like if I was walking down the hallway, I knew exactly who the person was. My classes were relatively small, and I thought that was really helpful. So then I decided, why am I going to go to a large university where I'm going to be in a lecture with 300 other students? That's the college experience my dad had, and I did not want that. I wanted to actually know who my peers are and my professors.
Yep.
And everyone here is just so nice and friendly, which is a big, it's not the same as home, obviously. This is Vermont, but it felt like home.
That's one of the things I like about the size of the school too, is I feel like I get to know students. They're not just a number. I get to know them personally and get to collaborate on projects and things like that. So that's definitely an advantage of a small school in my mind as well. In your time here, do you feel like you've had any particular transformative educational experiences that you could talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so I would definitely circle back to the documentary piece I did about diabetes. That definitely propelled me into documentary filmmaking. Like I knew I wanted to do it, but after I completed that, that's when I really knew I wanted to take it more seriously. But ever since the studio opened, and I've been working here Monday to Friday, I'd say that's been the most transformative experience. And it's bittersweet that it's happened in my later part of my academic career, but nonetheless, I'm really happy about it. And I've gotten to learn a lot of different technical skills that I didn't even know existed.
That's great. And for our audience members who might not know, the school just completed building this media creation studio that we're sitting in. It's an audio video creation studio where students can film interviews, film podcasts, record tiny desk concerts. There's all kinds of stuff we can do in this space. It's designed to be flexible, and it's a great space for audio video production. So it's good to hear that you've been able to take advantage of that, at least in your last year. So can you tell us a little bit about what else you do on campus, say like outside of classes, how you're involved in other areas of the community?
Yeah, so I'm very involved in the Community Health Action Network. I actually started, so we're known as CAN, and I was part of the original CAN, which was COVID. So we started literally because of the pandemic and wanting to make sure that we were cultivating a safe community for people, but also a forum for people to express any concerns that they had about just public health, safety, and wellness overall during a pandemic, because this was very new for people. But then once things with COVID started to subside, we realized, it shouldn't just be COVID. Public health is public health. So we expanded it to the Community Health Action Network. And lately I've been doing a lot with food security. So helping with the opening of our new food pantry on campus, exploring issues in local communities, and things like that.
That's great. And if I remember too, you were also involved in student government. Is that right?
Yeah, so I was in the student government for about 3 years. I started as the Secretary of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I was actually hired in June of 2020, so it was a very interesting time to start the position,
Right.
but it was a very rewarding one.
Great.
Nonetheless. And then I did student life for the next 2 years.
Okay. Now back a little bit to our department, I know you've done some internships, right? Can you talk a little bit about your experience doing internships in the journalism world?
Yeah, so my first internship, I always like to say I struck gold with this one, was at BT Digger. I was really happy about that one. I was, doing my internship search, and we've always looked at them in, classes with the news publication reporting classes. That was just a publication for us. So it was really great getting that acceptance and seeing how open they were to having me on their team. And it was a very, very rewarding experience. It's already great when you're producing stories for the community and it gets exposure, but when you have hundreds of thousands of monthly readers seeing your work, it just really amplifies the magnitude of how rewarding it is to tell a quality story.
Right. And I would imagine getting more mentorship from people that aren't just your professors, but professionals in the field. They're going to have different insights to share. And I would imagine that would help in your skill development as well.
Absolutely. And I also learned the value of knowing a little bit of everything. A lot of us like to have our little niches, and I'm guilty of this too. Like data reporting, nothing to do with numbers, that's not my thing, but you got to know how to interpret data if you're going to be a news reporter.
Right.
I didn't realize the value of that until I was there and I saw they had a whole team just for people who do data.
Right.
And politics is obviously a big one because that, seeps into a lot of different aspects of everyday life and just, news reporting.
Yeah.
So that was also really interesting.
And when I hear you say that, it reminds me of kind of why we have a converged curriculum, right? We want students to be comfortable working in a variety of forms of media. If you're interested in storytelling, you need to be a good writer. You need to be familiar with visuals, photography, video. You need to be familiar with design elements. And it sounds like that's what you're saying with your internship. You needed to be familiar with all these things, right? You had certain areas that you were more drawn to and you could focus on those, but you also had to do these other kinds of stories. And that's why our curriculum is set up the way it is with core requirements and then also having 4 electives that students have to take. And in those electives, you can dig into the areas that you're most interested in.
Yeah, and if it honestly wasn't for that, I don't think I'd be exposed to documentary filmmaking.
Right.
And even things with design, like my start was actually with digital art in Professor Soltzi's class. And when I first started digital media, I wanted nothing to do with design. I'm like, why am I in a Photoshop class? I'm trying to be a reporter. And then I loved it, and then I kept doing it.
Right.
And if I didn't have to take that class, I would not have realized that that was something I liked to do.
Right.
Because I never considered myself an artist.
And then you took those skills and you redesigned the Defender. You redesigned the print publication, and you had a big role in redesigning the online part of the publication as well. So it's interesting how those things that you thought you might not be interested in end up, allowing you to grow in certain areas and develop new interests.
Yeah, and it just helps to open you up as an individual, when you're not afraid to make weird digital art drawings and, not afraid to express your individuality. You just are more open to trying new things.
I think that's great. Yeah, I always encourage students to not be afraid to fail, right? To take risks, calculated risks anyway, and that's where so much learning happens.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any advice, let's say, for a prospective student thinking about St. Michael's College? Any advice on what they can do to make the most of their time here or what they could do to succeed here?
I would say to try new things. So don't be like me coming in with a pigeonholed idea of what you want to do. Open your world up. Please do. Don't limit yourself. It's just not good. There are lots of things that you don't know about yet or things that you don't know you'll like until you actually try it. And if you don't like it, that's cool too.
Right. At least you're trying.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Right.
And even if you're not great at it, to still keep trying. A lot of my earlier films sucked. They were terrible. I don't want anyone seeing those, but if those films weren't bad, I would not have any good films to date. So just because you're not great at first does not mean you will never be great.
Right.
It's just kind of a little waiting period.
And I think that's the beauty of the liberal arts, right? You're encouraged to try a lot of different things, to study a lot of different areas. And you're exposed to things that you never were exposed to before. So,
Yeah.
Great. Now, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, so why photojournalism?
Why photojournalism? It's a great question. So photography had always been a hobby for me. I never considered myself really an artist, or I couldn't draw, so I just didn't think I was artistic or that creative. But I love to take pictures, and I took some classes in high school. I took a class in college, and long story short, one thing led to another, and I was working in a volunteer teaching program, and they needed somebody to teach some basic photography classes and darkroom classes, and that was me. And so I had enough skills to teach those classes, and what had been a hobby turned more into a passion, and then I saw the potential, the storytelling potential of photography. I've always been interested in people and interested in stories, and photography became that way for me to connect with people and to share stories.
What would you say was the most instrumental photography, either independent project or photo assignment for a publication that you've ever completed?
So I think probably one of the longest term projects that I've worked on is in Pine Ridge, South Dakota with the Oglala Lakota people. The volunteer teaching program that I was involved with was on the Pine Ridge Reservation. I taught at a high school, Red Cloud Indian School. And in my time there, I got to know some amazing people. And I saw sides of Lakota life that were beyond the stereotypes that my friends back east had. And I spent time photographing just daily life. And after teaching there for 3 years, I went to graduate school, and I had to do a thesis project. And so my thesis project was back on the reservation, and I was looking at how people kind of live in two worlds, how they balance the modern and traditional in their everyday life in healthy, positive ways. And so I think this long-term project really, I think was the most influential one that I've done for me, partly because I've just deepened my relationships with my friends and the people I photographed. And it really helped me see the value in using photography and storytelling to go beyond limiting stereotypes.
And how do you use your knowledge and just experience of working with different communities and integrating that into the classroom and teaching people who may not have been exposed to different communities throughout their life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in trying to share other people's stories, it's helped me become a good listener. And I try to go into any project with an open mind, and I try to communicate that to my students. And I also try to share mistakes that I've made with my students, so they might not make those same mistakes. And I just try to bring my excitement and passion for what I do into the classroom. And not every student I teach is going to be interested in photojournalism, but if I can share my enthusiasm and my excitement and help them find something that they're curious about that can lead to a passion, I feel like I'm doing my job.
Yeah, redirection.
Yeah, in some ways, helping people find what it is that they want to do. And just because I've done things a certain way doesn't mean other people should, but it's, I think my real world experience translates well into the classroom, right? It's not just like I learned these things in a book, right? I've traveled to a lot of different places around the States and in different countries, meeting people, working on photography projects, and I bring that real world experience into the classroom.
And if you've had to have like one lasting impact on the students you teach, what would that be?
I think it's about encouraging students to pursue their curiosity. And if students can do that, it'll eventually lead to a passion, which could lead to, a vocation, a life path. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry if that was a hard one.
No, it's a great question, but I don't want to assume that I'm going to have some huge lasting impact. But if I can get students to be curious and look at the world in a different way, to question preconceived notions, I think that's part of the liberal arts and part of learning. So Ashley, one of the things I realized that I didn't ask you was to tell us a little bit about your senior seminar project. And before I let you answer that, just to let our audience know, in our department we have a 2-semester capstone senior seminar. And the first semester is students doing research on a particular topic, socially significant topic, starting interviews, and second semester deals a lot with production, either writing a book, producing a documentary film, or a documentary website. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your senior seminar project.
Yeah, so I'm doing a web documentary. I chose that venue because I love design, film, the investigative part of the research, and also motion graphics. So I was like, that's the perfect venue because I get to do all of the above. So my topic is about how television streaming is changing the nature of children's programming, their development, how social media plays into the mix. It's a very broad topic. And I actually arrived at that topic based on a project I did for the audio and podcasting class last spring. I interviewed Francois Clemens. He's the first African-American to ever have a recurring role on television. He's most known for being on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as Officer Clemens. And I realized I really like children's TV and just the impact that you can have on a child. So I wanted to research that more because I knew children's TV from the consumer standpoint, but wanted to learn more about the behind the scenes. Why does it work for kids and why is it different? So then that pivoted me into researching it. So not only looking at what research has been done, but also curating research of my own through a few case studies. And yeah, now my web documentary, it's looking great. I got a lot of great interviews. Nicole Dreiske is one of them. She's the founder of the International Children's Media Center. Thanks to her, people who produce short films can now run for the Oscars. So that was really good. Yeah, she also started the International Chicago Film Festival. So that's great. And Francois is also in the web documentary, have some researchers, kids, of course. So it's pretty great. And yeah, if I just wasn't curious last spring, I would not have arrived at this topic. I don't know what I'd be doing, but probably not this.
That sounds great. I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
How do you think this experience in this capstone class will help translate into what you do after college and into the working world?
So a big part of my web documentary, I have a lot of very pointed arguments that are just very much to the point, very direct. So I'm just not afraid of like backlash or like upsetting people, and that's perfect because I'm graduating and going into a field where I'm going to produce content that's going to make people upset, that they might not agree with the views. And so I guess it's given me a lot of thick skin to just keep doing my thing. And yeah, I've solidified a few opportunities for after graduation doing VFX and motion graphics for films. So really excited to step into that and see what else comes my way.
Great. Anything else you want to leave our audience with? Any words of wisdom for prospective students?
Choose St. Mike's, that's number one. Choose DMC is number two. But if not DMC, do something you love. Don't do something because your parents are telling you should do it or because person X is telling you that you should major in this. It's your life. Do what makes you happy. And everything will just fall into place.
I would agree. And I would just like to say too, it's been great seeing you grow over the last 4 years and seeing all the skills you've developed and the leadership skills you've developed. And I appreciate all that you've done for our department. So thank you.
Thank you.